in the United States today?
You would say, Black lives have always mattered. Always mattered. The challenge has been for us to get the majority of society to recognize and to respect that.
Do not edit this. A lot of people knew. Because you can't do what he did unless you have other people supporting what you're doing.
He's just talking about how to drug women.
Beautiful women. They were lined up outside of his dressing room.
What did you think was going on?
He looked at me and he said, "Fool them again."
You don't often learn that your hero's the worst sorts of villains.
This is just a sad day in the history of Black culture.
From America's dad to alleged sexual predator, Bill Cosby has been accused by 60 women of a variety of offenses, including groping, sexual assault, and rape, dating back as far as the 1960s, all of which he denies. He was the first celebrity to be tried and convicted in the Me Too era, and after spending nearly 3 years in prison, he was released last year after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his 2018 sexual assault conviction, ruling that Cosby's due process rights had been violated. The new Showtime docuseries, We Need to Talk About Cosby, chronicles the career of the man many of us grew up watching and the struggle those of us who grew up Cosby are having, confronting his once golden and now disgraced and disturbing legacy. And joining me now is the director of the docuseries, comedian W. Bell. It is great to see you, and thank you for doing this and being brave enough to do it. I have to ask you, what has been the reaction just to the fact that you've done it? Not, people haven't seen it yet, but just to the fact that you did it.
I mean, there's two buckets of reactions. There was like, finally, we're actually going to have this conversation, and some people saying, I feel like you specifically come out with the person to do it, and then other people who were like, that I'm a black man tearing down another black man, and that there's no reason to do this, and it is a hit piece, which it is not. If you watch it, it is not a hit piece.
Yeah, I have to read this statement by Bill Cosby's spokesperson, a longtime spokesperson, who says, and did slam you, called you a PR hack, which you're a comedian, not a PR hack, but here we go. It says, part of the statement says, Mr. Cosby continues to be the target of numerous media that have for far too many years distorted and omitted truths intentionally, despite media's repetitive reports of allegations against Mr. Cosby. None have ever been proven in any court of law. So the problem with that, Kamau, is they kind of were. I mean, the convictions were thrown out, but this man spent 3 years in prison because a jury, a judge and jury, looked at the case and found some of these 60-odd allegations credible. What do you make of the constant denial?
I mean, that's the way he has framed this from the beginning. There's been sort of this talk of it being like, some people have called it a quote-unquote lynching, or that they're coming to take a black man down. And while I understand that America's history of racism and president of racism is often trying to take black men down, in this case, I believe this black man did what he's been accused of. And also, let's remember, in the deposition that was unsealed, he says, talking about Andrea Constand as she was passed out, I entered the area between permission and rejection, and I'm not stopped. And he's talking about a drug war.
And that on that part, and you're a comedian, so and comedians have started to come out and say, look, in our world, in your world, in the world of comedy, people knew that Cosby was doing these things, and there are people in your documentary who say, look, you can't have done this if there weren't people who knew that you were doing it and letting you get away with it. We're talking about this is going all the way back to the 60s, and I don't know if you feel this way, but when I go back and I think about some of the comedy that my mom, we watched with my mom, right? I mean, we all found Bill Cosby to be hilarious. His stand-up routines, his routines that were played on TV were hilarious to us. But that you sneaked in there seemed to be Cosby hiding in plain sight, making jokes literally about drugging women, Spanish Fly, that being one of his go-to jokes. Do you think that in some ways Cosby was winking and nodding at what he was doing, and it was just that he was so culturally important to us that we were just ignoring it?
I mean, just to be clear, this is about Bill Cosby, but the doc makes it clear this is bigger than Bill Cosby. Lots of powerful men have gotten away with sexual assault and rape of women and sort of haven't been that closed about it. And we sort of had to really say, what are we looking at? We have to pay attention here. So I think that I think Bill Cosby got away with it for so long that maybe he didn't feel the need to hide it,
Yeah, you talk about in the doc in the first part. You talk about the fact that he was sort of the un-Dick Gregory, right? Like Dick Gregory was the first out of the box in the 1960s as a black man doing stand-up and getting national credit for it, and he kind of came behind him, but then was more successful commercially because he sort of stripped the race talk out. But the things that he did and the things that he created, from the Cosby Kids, which I grew up watching, you grew up watching, to the Cosby Show, that presented blackness and black family and black people in such a positive light. Like, that was his legacy. That's the thing he did that in many ways made it possible to elect a Barack Obama, right? Because people could see black folk in a different way because of the way he did things. What do you think in the end his legacy, how does that balance for you wind up sort of, sorting out? Because his importance to the culture, it's hard to not acknowledge it, but this thing that he seems to have done to so many women, it's just like hanging there like a dark cloud over him.
Well, for me, I think this doc is about reckoning with all of it. I think sometimes we try to turn into a math equation. Was there more good than bad? I think I'm just trying to look at all of it. And I think there's extended sections of the documentary that Cosby and his team would like, because we are talking about good things he did, like when he integrated black people into the stunt performers because he refused to do a stunt on I Spy. He refused to let a white stunt performer do his stunt on I Spy. He said he wanted a black stunt performer to do it. And that changed history. There's lots of things like that we talk about, but you can't separate the two. In some sense, this is trying to save a part of his legacy with those of us who don't want to look at it because it's too painful to think about all the allegations of assault and rape. But we have to look at all of it, in my opinion.
And last question to you, Cosby also as a moral lecturer and a scold of black people, because that's the other part of his legacy. How ironic is it for you that this man who did the cornbread speech, where he's like literally scolding us, telling us how to behave, turns out to be this? Yeah, the pound cake speech.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what ultimately was part of his downfall, is that a lot of people looked at him publicly scolding black people and said, how can you do that when there's all these other stories out there? One of those people, of course, being the comedian Hannibal Buress. But I think that was part of these stories starting to be exposed, because people just felt like it was so much hypocrisy that they couldn't deal with. Jelani Cobb speaks to that. I think this is a documentary where we're still talking about Bill Cosby was our teacher, and we still need to learn from him to create a society that is safer, more nurturing, more healing, and more just for survivors of sexual assault and rape, because that's how we can limit this from happening in the future.
Well, those who said you were just the man to do this, they were right. Thank you very much. The 4-part documentary series, We Need to Talk About Cosby, premieres Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern on Showtime. W. Kamau Bell, thank you for doing that. It was very brave of you, and I think really, really important for the culture. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy.
Well, Who Won the Week is still ahead, but first, President Biden visits the site of today's bridge collapse in Pennsylvania during a trip touting his new infrastructure plan. But guess who else is trying to take credit for that bill's success, despite voting against it? Oh, this is an easy one. You got this. We'll be right back.